I'll just sort of start talking slowly, and there may be some more people joining in, but this is a kind of an extra session that will hopefully give you guys some opportunity to ask us questions about FontLab 7. But yesterday I've done a sort of a talk in that focused on some things kind of very quickly that were that are part of the upcoming FontLab 7.2 release, which will be a free update to all FontLab 7 users. I think that well, later today or tonight I'll publish the public beta, so I can just give this is, yeah, I'm gonna share the entire screen, that's fine. Come on, just not gonna yeah. Can you see the screen, Yuri? Or
yes, I can see the screen, but it's about 7.1.
Yes, so this was the release notes for 7.1. We have the release notes for for 7.2, which yeah, this is kind of I remember as we were working on FontLab 6 and the subsequent releases and the number of bug fixes like hugely outweighed the number of new features and feature sort of improvements that we've been doing. But and then for a while it was interesting. It was kind of half-half, but now I've made myself a little system that I put, you know, whenever something is really like new or improved, I put one thing into the source, and then for bug fixes, I put something else. Oh, come on. I really don't like how scrolling works in this. But anyhow, then, you know, and I just count them. So we have about sort of the mostly minor issues, but some more important ones as well. So there are about 50 fixes and about 70 new and improved features. So that sort of, I think this is the first release where really the improvements, we had the time and opportunity to do them because the number of problems reported by users was relatively small. And note, this is like this is collected from about, what, 3 months, I think, because, well, one kind of thing that I can say is that the build number is actually days. It's sort of days since, I think, January 1st, 2000. So basically by the build number, you can always judge how much time has passed. So this is like 7515, and we're now around 90 or almost 100 days later. So it's about 3 months that we've done that 7.1.5 release. And yeah, there's been some problems reported, but most of all, we've had time to do some bigger things. And I talked about them yesterday. So we have this suggest distance stuff that kind of is like an adaptive grid that sort of expands the outline at a per master defined distance that you can then snap to. So it's great for doing things like changing weight or changing width at some quantized distances. And of course, you can then sort of change the distance slightly if you're doing round or well, it's up to your liking. So this complements very nicely the suggest stems stuff that we've had. And there's little things like, you know, adding inflections and really tiny things like double clicking a node that is on top of another node now works better. One thing that I will talk about in more detail in a second is the fractional and rounded or integer coordinates. I'm going to scroll that. I'll just see we've got some improvement in how guides work. And yeah, okay, we have one thing that I'll mention here as well, which is about glyph window wrapping, because it sort of also is about interactivity. Components, anchors, lots of little things, also attached components that are kind of like a middle thing between auto layers that are fully automatically building your font and fully manually composite glyphs. So you can have composite glyphs, but you can attach, if there are anchors in the source glyphs, some of the components that you declared as attached, they will always stick to the place that comes from the combining anchors, which is very handy for ligatures, but also for all kinds of design where you may be making an alternate, for instance, that uses you know, an alternate Arabic letter, or maybe a longer one or something, and then you want to attach stuff there. So yeah, variable components, I've covered that as well. There's some improvements in glyph metrics, much faster interpolation, which allows us to do kind of live checking. That's covered in the recording of yesterday's session. We've cleaned up, I'll talk about it a little bit, cleaned up the PostScript hinting and UFO interaction, and there's a big section that I'll probably not cover today, which has to do with lookups and Vault integration. I've talked about it a little bit yesterday, but that's maybe not so interesting to most people in terms of the Vault integration, because most designers use the feature syntax and automatic features, but there's still, of course, quite a few writing systems where something like Vault is useful. And now FontLab kind of interchanges with Vault. So that's one app that FontLab 7 now kind of fully interacts with. There are some limitations, but overall, FontLab can export to Vault, then can import data back to your source project. So you can work, you know, when you worked with Vault, let me just find, yeah. When you worked with Microsoft Vault, you had to export your font from your font editor into TTF or OTF, open it in Vault, and there you could add features. But then you couldn't really very easily bring them back to your source project in any way. So they were always sort of like a post-processing additional thing. And then if you let's say change the underlying design, you could export the font again, open the old font, export the Vault project, open the newer font, import the Vault project, all in Vault. But it was kind of slow. So with the integration we're having now, it's a little bit easier. And yeah, there are two things. Maybe I'll just start with them because they're just very. That's something that I kind of forgot to cover yesterday, and that's, you know, the font window has the sidebar, and the sidebar allows you to do kind of subset the font window or filter it. And there are two filtering areas basically at the top. That's the very traditional FontLab Studio 5 style filtering mechanism, so you could turn on a code page, for instance, and now in 7, if this button hide unfiltered glyphs is on or off. And by the way, what I'm doing is I'm pressing F1, and this shows me that this quick help. They're now pretty large because I've set them so in preferences. So normally, in general, there is the large help. I turn it off. Normally, the quick help looks like this. So it's whenever you're curious about anything on the on the UI, just hold F1 or FN F1, and you'll get some information about what it's for. And we're adding more. There's like, for here, there's a little cheat sheet, which is very dense for the contour tool, because that's the most intensive tool. But then in preferences, large help, I usually use it for presenting. Then the stuff is just larger and, well, better visible on screen. So hide and unfiltered glyphs here. This is a toggle that controls how the filter that you've chosen for the font window works. If it's on, you only see the glyphs that are captured by the filter, and the other glyphs are hidden from the font window. If it's off, then the filtered glyphs are first, and then the other ones follow. So I'm going to turn it on so it's more clear what's happening. Code page, Unicode range, nothing here. These are the so-called prospective or filters, I think we call them. These are the ones that also show missing glyphs, or glyphs that are maybe planned to be added. That's mostly used with encodings. So if you have like an encoding, you may have placeholder cells for your glyphs that you want to add later. So that's the prospective filters. In addition, there's search. So you could do something like lowercase letter, maybe, choose it. And that's another filter that's being applied automatically here. Search history, that gives you sort of the choices that you've made before using search or using these top filters. They're stored here. And if you like a particular one, you can drag it down to the bookmarks and just click it later, and you'll get that filter. But in addition, sort of in later versions of FontLab, we've added or expanded the sidebar, which has things like categories and numerals and so on. Also some properties like fonts that are glyphs that are declared as OpenType simple or base glyphs, or OpenType marked glyphs using the glyph info panel here. There's the glyph definition class that's written into the GDEF table, and that's shown here. Also things like blank, meaning glyphs that have no content, or references, glyphs that are source glyphs for components, basically. Composite, meaning the glyphs that are made out of components. Non-composite, meaning glyphs that are not made out of components. So that's very, very fast way of working with these filters. But now we've added a kind of an obvious filter, and that is flag, which used to be called mark in FontLab Studio 5, which is the color thing that you do. Because mark is also used in terms like mark attachment, or mark as in combining marks, etc., diacritics, diacritical marks. In FontLab 6 and 7, we call this flag, just like you use them in, I don't know, email applications, so you can flag something. So this is color flags. And now, when you use this functionality, if you select something, click give it a different flag, you can now filter it separately. So this is just very, very handy, and this is something that was possible previously but was complicated. So now it's very fast. And also, yeah, layers and masters. If you have multiple masters, you'll see stuff here. Suffix, that's also new. That's basically a suffix portion or particle that is used in the design, in the glyph names. I'm going to maybe make the cells larger. So here, for instance, there's dot case, because these glyphs have the dot case suffix. There's the maybe, this is John Hudson's design, Castoro, so he also uses the underscore in suffixes, which I think in his case means some for glyphs that are used for contextuals. So that will be like for an F ligature, that's the portion, the I portion, or the J portion that then can combine. And similarly here, this is the F part of the ligature. If you have multiple suffixes in a glyph, like let's say dot sc dot swash, like a swash small cap, then this suffix listing would show both sc and swash as separate entries. So kind of this is why it's suffix particles in a sense, and the glyph would appear in both. So that's new. These two things, flags and suffix, I think they've been kind of waiting to be added for a while. Okay, so this is the one important thing about this FontLab 7.2 is that it uses an updated format for the VFC and VFJ files, and unfortunately, if you save from 7.2, you won't be able to open it in older versions, or in some cases you may, but mostly not. So this is just a word of caution. So when you switch to 7.2, you won't be able to go back to older versions. But of course, we generally, I mean, when we produce newer versions of FontLab 7, we do hope that people update to them, because they're usually, much, much better than the older ones. There may be occasional glitches that sort of something used to work better in the old version, but really, really rare. And we fix these things very quickly. So, but that's okay. That's just the sort of new stuff around FontLab 7.2 as it is. But I wanted to talk specifically today more about the integration between different apps. So there's RoboFont. There's I'm gonna open. Let me just hope. Oops. Drag and drop in macOS. Oh, okay. And there's glyphs, of course. Oh, yeah, okay. I can open this one. Yes. Good. So I'll start with glyphs because, well, many people use glyphs, and actually quite a few people use both glyphs and FontLab 7 and kind of go back and forth for various reasons, that they maybe like some functionalities like the drawing in FontLab 7 may be better, but they also prefer some other things like the sort of language support that Glyphs offers. And I think it's wonderful. I think it's, the tools that we all build for the small community. I mean, there are architects, there are 3D modeling people who use different tools and interchange files between them. And I think that's what, That's what the UFO format has been created for example. And we've got some improved support there as well. So maybe actually I'll start with the UFO. So this is, I'm gonna open what, Sublime Text, maybe, yeah. Yep. And open this, open the UFO, which is a package, open the lib plist, and then maybe a glyph, we'll see. Yeah, okay, this one doesn't have any lib entry, but one of the things that FontLab 7, so FontLab 7 supports UFO 2 and UFO 3, and when you have a font, you can export the font as either UFO package, which is basically just a standalone UFO, which can be used for the current layer. So if you have a multi-master font, whatever is selected in the masters and layers panel or in the masters selection here at the top, when I export font as, I get the current layer, or I can choose masters and that will let me export all the masters, or instances, the predefined instances that are defined in font info as UFOs, UFO package here. All these export profiles, including the custom ones that I've created, these support these three selections: current layer, instances, masters. Then there's kind of multi-master. These are the two that are native to FontLab, so compact or JSON. This is the same as save as, basically VFJ or VFC. And then these also are multi-master, so they don't you don't get to choose like one master or many masters, but the entire font project. So that's the Glyphs format. That's the variable TrueType or variable PostScript flavored, so CFF2 font, and DesignSpace plus UFO. So DesignSpace plus UFO is a package that has one DesignSpace file, a master subfolder, and then the masters, the UFO masters. So these three would go there. And by default, the UFO and DesignSpace UFO uses UFO 3. But if you customize and in format you use legacy version, you can call that, say, UFO 2. And I can also say round notes, for instance, and maybe do some other tweaks here. Say, okay, that's my custom profile, and that would export to UFO 2. But UFO 3 has been around for quite a while now, so that's all right. Now, UFO has a mechanism to store, for instance, inside the UFO, there is a file called lib.plist, and different plugins, different apps can store their own additional data. And also in the design space, it's also possible to store additional data, and different apps use that. Now, in FontLab 7.2, when you open a design space plus UFOs or just the UFOs, I'm gonna drag it here. We'll get to that in a moment. I'll choose keep fractional actually. That's also good. So I have the project here, and when I go to font info, I can see that there are now 2 extra entries in the font info, FontLib and MasterLib. And FontLib stores the DesignSpace lib entries. And this is a JSON representation, so it's it really is fully equivalent to the plist representation, just more compact, and we use JSON in many other places. So this is just a sort of Apple plist to JSON translation, which in fact the Apple plist also has a JSON representation that really looks identical. Just happens so that UFO uses the XML plist format, not the JSON plist format. But if it did, it would look just like that. MasterLib are the custom, the lib entries for the UFO lib.plist. And that again, that can store different kinds of data. And FontLab does not currently, if there's something in the lib plist, FontLab, for instance, does export our own things like the TrueType hinting. Here, no? Yeah. And this is FontLab used to export the TrueType hinting commands inside Glyph files using a format that was slightly invalid. Well, it actually was invalid in terms of the plist format. So 7.2 switches to a new format, and the com.fontlab keys for the font or master lib, FontLab sort of interprets them in our own way, and also a few others, and then they don't show up in here in the master lib. But all the other ones, all the unknown ones that are not public or com.fontlab, they will now show up. You could edit them, you could remove them, but if you export them back into UFO or DesignSpace, they will also be exported. Before, FontLab just didn't read them. So if you opened a UFO that had all these lib plist or lib keys inside the glyph, they would get lost. If you exported it back, now they're retained. So that's one thing that's great. Another thing is also that in the glyphs file format, there are these things that are called custom parameters. And this is just this is a very silly font, but it does, if I go to the font info, I have master custom parameters. I've just added a bunch of them here per master. This doesn't have any, this has a bunch. Font has, so basically this is, and you could think of the custom parameters as being something like the lib. So since Glyphs has the font custom parameters and the master custom parameters, and now when you open a Glyphs file in FontLab, and I go to the font info, I see that I get these parameters, and they're actually using the prefixes that Glyphs also uses when it exports to UFO. So basically these custom parameters, Georg has this com Schriftgestaltung prefix for historical reasons, I guess, and then font master is the key prefix that Glyphs uses when it exports the custom parameters into UFO, and we use the same. So basically, when you open a Glyphs file, the master lib contains the master custom parameters. The font lib contains the font custom parameters. And again, FontLab does not interpret them in any way. And of course, if you change your design significantly, or you add or remove some masters, do these things, then the data in these custom parameters from the FontLab's perspective may become invalid, or from another app's perspective may become invalid. This is also true for the UFO lib. That's how it's thought or engineered to work. That, let's say if there's a plugin that relies on some data in a glyph and it stores some extra stuff in the lib, and now I completely change the glyph, then that extra data that the plugin stored may no longer apply, may be completely stupid. But that's for that app that will then interpret these lib keys that it knows to check. From the UFO perspective, the specification says, if you modify a UFO, please keep the lib keys as they are. Don't destroy them. So FontLab used to, destroy them, just didn't have a storage place to store them. Now it has. I could say that FontLab 7.2 is probably much more, compatible with UFO 3 now because of that change. But the font lib and master lib entries, they're of course stored in the VFC and VFJ, and you can add your own. So, if I needed some extra parameters, and this is JSON, I could do something like, com Twardoch to remember wash dishes, right? And that's the idea is this reverse prefix notation, that whatever that somebody knows what it is, somebody expects what it is, and when you're writing your own keys, you should put something. It doesn't have to be a valid website, just sort of some identifier that associates the data with you. So for instance, Adobe uses in UFO puts com.adobe.something else, etc. And so this would be stored, and if I export this now to UFO, I hope it will work. I haven't. Or DesignSpace UFO, let's say. Where's that? Here. Yeah. Profile. Okay, it's going to make a sub profile. Export. Was it? Yeah, it was in the regular, right? So here, masters, regular, show package contents, and lib.plist. Yeah. Hooray. I think I actually haven't haven't really tested this before, so I'm glad that it works, and it works as it should. And now I imagine if I only knew how to, unfortunately I'm really bad with RoboFont, but if I knew how to see the lib in RoboFont. Does anybody know that? Font info, maybe? I don't know. Not going to be. I'm sure it is. Sorry, I don't use RoboFont much, but okay. So that's like a quick overview of the lib. There's another thing that is mentioned, that we've mentioned, or I mentioned briefly, the hinting, and this is so PostScript hints in UFO have a kind of longish history. There was a back and forth about how they should be stored. And Adobe did something similar to what FontLab did. That is, originally came up with a structure that was actually invalid in terms of the plist format. So that inside the data key there was some data. And now later, Adobe came up with a new structure under the key com Adobe type AutoHint v2, which had this structure, and that structure later the UFO developers decided to kind of adopt as the official storage format. Therefore, public.postscript.hints got adopted as the key, because the public prefix means that it's in the lib, but it's part of the UFO spec. So FontLab 7.2 now exports PostScript hints in this new format. If you export to UFO 3, if you export to UFO 2, it uses the older format. So the legacy setting I showed, if you want the older stuff, because your tools rely on it, just, export profiles here, turn on use legacy format version. It sort of says UFO on is UFO 2, off is UFO 3. For other formats, this toggle doesn't have any function, but at some point, if we end up supporting 2 different subversions of a particular format, you'll be able to choose. Okay, so let me. Yeah, this is. I think this is. This is sort of the. There was something else. It does escape me. Maybe I'll come back, because I've been talking for a while, and I wonder, we still have about 20 minutes left. So I think what I'll do is where's that? Stop sharing at the bottom here. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I've stopped sharing my screen. Okay, I see some questions. Very good. So you can. So I see that Lawrence is asking first. Can you use Python in FontLab to write and read glyphs and RoboFont lib stuff? I don't think that the public beta of 7.2 does not yet have any public API to access the data, but we will add it.
No, actually it does have a new way to access all.
Oh, really? Oh, very good. I didn't.
Not sure anyone tried that, but it should work.
I haven't tried, so I'll try soon enough. Oh yes, okay. Good point about the glyph lib. So maybe you could, Yuri, perhaps, if there's some other questions.
Well, if you open a glyphs file, then which has some lib data, that will go to font or master a lib entry in FontLab, and that is something that you can access from Python.
Right. I wanted to. Okay, I actually exported this. This is interesting. Let me just do something. So I'll do something silly, or not silly, but I'll share the screen again. Yes, click share. Okay, this, and then I'm not sure I have any. Well, I should have something handy that is like a glyph file, but I don't. So let me. That's a bit simple. I don't know where to put the glyph data. The Glyph glyph data. Like here, lib. Okay, yes, right. So I'm gonna do this, but then I'm gonna use, because public mark color, I think we read. So I mean parts or interpret, but I'll just do this. So I'm adding a lib element to the glyph file or glyph file, as some call it. And now, where was that? That was here. I'll open this in FontLab. And the A glyph doesn't have any contours, but there's a source panel in FontLab, panels, source, that, yep, that works. So, so that displays the JSON representation of the glyph or of the layer or of the element, if there is one. Because UFOs are kind of like correspond to masters, and in FontLab, so in FontLab, the lib JSON element is part of the layer structure. So you have some data, you have, if there is some custom data imported from UFO, it's stored in the lib key, and the rest applies the same as with, you know, with the other, just like the font info master and font lib. One remark regarding this notation, you know, we had in older FontLab, the source panel displayed the initial and closing braces, because that would constitute a valid JSON. But in now we've kind of removed them because it's, well, you know, it's easy to forget. It's easy to, well, it's easy to get confused if you're pasting something, or, you know, if it was empty, like in a different, let's say in this, you know, that I would have to start with this and then start typing. That's a bit complicated. So basically, you just write the JSON as if this was inside the most outer braces of the JSON. That's the idea.
Actually, there's one interesting thing that you may try. If you copy data from font info from any of the pages, it will actually copy it as JSON data, so you probably can paste it into the library for some reason.
Possibly, yeah.
Since we use JSON and everywhere, it's all data.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So basically, they
copy some contour as some glyph contour as a part of the library for some reason.
Yeah. So the FontLab, or I can go to here, and this is, yes, this would be this is actual JSON. I've just copied from the, you know, legal page, and that is now, that could be an entry. And if you, yeah, if you're not sure how JSON works, basically that's the thing. You can go to any other page, like zones, click here to copy page, go to FontLib, just remove these outer, but you get like, oh, okay, that's what JSON looks like. You know, this is basically, this could be a valid lib entry. It doesn't make sense to put that stuff there right now, but it could be. So anyhow, this is so the
Adam, can you explain rounding?
Yes, of course, yes, rounding. Yeah, thank you. I forgot about it.
Just briefly, because it's a thing, I guess.
Yes, I kind of forgot about it, but it's important. We have changed so in FontLab 7.1.5, you could work in either integer or I'm going to just open maybe, yeah, something simple. Let's see if that opens. Okay, it doesn't open because it's the newer one. Hang on, just what I just want something simple. Hello. Yeah, I'll just open the UFO. Yeah. So yes, this is actually, so that UFO, it does contain some data that contains fractional coordinates. And in 7.15, okay, I'll say round, but I'll close it. In 7.15, there was this setting, contour coordinates round when editing. And if it is off and you open any font in the older what? I'm not sure. But it's probably there were two states. There were basically either this setting could be on or it could be off. If it was off, then all editing in all currently open fonts, you could have multiple open fonts, and all the editing in them was in fractional coordinates. When you turned round when editing on, then whatever you change something, FontLab would round the entire content to integers. So, and also when you opened, when round when editing was on, but you opened a font that contained fractional coordinates, you got this dialog which told you either you can round the coordinates and keep this option round when editing on, or you can turn off round when editing, but then that round when editing would be turned off for the entire editing in this session, including what happens in other fonts that are currently open. That was not right. So in 7.2, in 7.2, there is a preference. So I'm going to say keep fractional for now, close it. There's a preference in font info, in preferences open fonts, round coordinates. Now, that applies to when you create a new font or when you open existing fonts. Open existing fonts in formats other than the most recent VFC and VFJ. So when it's off, that preference, and I open a font, well, I get no warning. If it's on, and I open a font, and it does have fractional coordinates, so the preference is kind of like a default. It asks me, should I round them or should I keep fractional? Now, when I say keep fractional, then there is now a new switch in font info that actually controls whether the font project, the particular font project, works in integer coordinates or in fractional coordinates. So if I go to font info, family dimensions, near where the UPM is, there is now this checkbox. And that checkbox, because I said keep fractional coordinates, so that checkbox is now off. And I can work in fractional coordinates. So I can, go here and I can edit and see that that these are fractional coordinates. I could turn on contour coordinates preview rounding, which kind of gives this live visual rounding to integers. So it's like, simulating the rounding, but the internal rotation, slanting, etc., it's all lossless because it's in fractional coordinates, so any rounding errors don't accumulate, but people may not like it. So what 7.2 now adds is the simple checkbox in font info it says, if you turn it on, I click OK, and the font does contain fractional coordinates, it will ask me. If I say round, then it rounds everything, and it's all rounded, it's always rounded, but only for the font that has this setting. So basically, right now I could be working with one fractional font and one integer font, and whenever I switch, I get the right behavior, because that font info setting is stored in the VFC, so it's a per font setting. In older versions, it all depended on the editing mode that was kind of global for session, which was not good. So this is round coordinates in font info. When I save the VFC or VFJ, then FontLab will no longer ask me anything when I open it, regardless of that preference. The preference...
Adam, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But we have like few minutes left, and maybe we have time for just one question.
Yeah. So that's I hope that I hope explains it. And the release notes that will be out there, I recommend that people when we publish them for 7.2, there's all this is explained in detail. So yeah, Yuri, you wanted to say something?
Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone who is with us this Saturday, evening or whatever, depending on where you are. And
so, yeah.
Well, okay, if there is one question, we still have a time for it. If not, we'll just wrap up then, I think.
Yep. And of course, so the FontLab 7.2 beta will be out soon. And well, if there are issues, if you download, test, work with it, support.fontlab.com is the best way to contact us, because you can attach a file and explain what's going on.
Adam,
yep, and yeah.
Grace Lawrence is asking if you could
request from JB. Could you announce something? Yes. The president of ATypI says hello.
It's the next session.
Happening 5 minutes, in 5 minutes. Okay. So that's the, so yes, so there is a next session. The president of ATypI says hello. Is that right? Yeah. And then, there is the Hangout room, which I'll be at. So if, you want to chat, or also you can contact us. Yeah, I think, support fontlab.com, or the forum, support fontlab.com is better if you want to kind of, submit something that's relevant to your project. Otherwise, drop me an email at adam@fontlab.com. And well, thanks a lot for listening. Thanks. Bye, guys.